What's up? What's up? What's up? Peace, peace, peace. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm back again, coming through live in effect. So tonight, I have a question to ask all of you out there. For those of you that are watching, what do y'all really know about the transatlantic slave trade? Besides the fact that it started in 1619, what do y'all really know? Because it goes deeper than what we know. See, we thought that it started in the 1600s, but it really didn't start like that. The transatlantic slave trade actually started in 1441. And one of the first Europeans that went to what we know as Central West Africa are the Portuguese and the Spanish. Then we're going to get into a little talk about Christopher Columbus and all of that. Okay. But see, this is why you have to go into details. Okay. Because it's, when I say, especially when we talk about slavery, it goes deeper. And I'm going to go back and pull up my ancestry and show you guys why it goes deeper. I don't know how many of you guys may have took the test, but if you haven't, you guys need to if you guys haven't taken the test, you guys need to do so. Get you an ancestry test. And you will know it's something very unusual. If those of you that have take ancestry and 23andMe, you will know something very unusual. You will see that there is the spot where it says Spanish and Portuguese, and you have like a small percentage. Maybe some of us got a higher percentage. Do you know why there's there? Do you know why it's there? As I always say before, history and science go hand in hand. History and science go hand to hand. That your genetics alone tells a story about the events that took place with your ancestry. I'm going to say that again. Your genetics alone tells a story about the events that took place within your ancestry. So now I want to show you guys some information. I'm going to read some information. All right. But I'm going to read it from a couple of sources. So I'm going to use I'm going to use this book right here. And I'm going to use this book. And I got some online sources for you. All right. So, as a matter of fact, let me go to the online source. All right. All right. So, right here, this is one of the websites I want to show you guys. Hey, everybody in the chat. Hey, BBO. Hey, hey, Chauncey. Hey, Centavo. Peace. Welcome back. Thank you guys for coming through. All right. So let me show you guys. Right here under New Jersey State Library. Unit 2, Africa, Europe, and the Rise of Afro-America, 1441 through 1619. Okay. Now, this is the earliest time period of the transatlantic slave trade. But I'm going to read. It says the background. The continuous presence of persons of African descent on soil that became the United States begins in 1619 with the arrival of 20 Africans at Jamestown, Virginia, aboard a Dutch warship from the West Indies. Their arrival was a part of the transatlantic slave trade lasting almost 4 centuries and accompanying the larger process of European colonization of the world. This trade involved transporting African slaves to the Americas so their labor could be used in the economic development of this vast region. Now, I know it may sound redundant, but we got to go back down to memory lane. Since members of all racial groups and some religious groups, for example, Jews, Christian, and Muslim, have been enslaved at some point in time, Africans hold no monopoly on serving as slaves. Anglo-Saxon and Franks, for example, were among the Europeans who were enslaved during the Middle Ages. Other Europeans captured and sold each other as late as mid-15th century. Such activity often invoked the papal wrath, since many of these slaves were Christians shipped to Muslim lands such as the Sultanate of Egypt. The word slave, in fact, is derived from the word Slav. Slavic group, for example, Poles, Ukrainians, Serbs, and Kols, often captured by the Crimean Tartars, provided many of the slaves used by the Turks of the Ottoman Empire for the better part of this empire's history. That's 1357 to 1918. All right. And although slavery traditionally exists in some African society, its nature there, similar to the nature of bondage in some other slave system found throughout the world, was radically different from the system found in the Americas. Slaves in Africa, for example, usually did not pass on their status to their offspring, and they often were allowed opportunity for social mobility. All right. I'm getting there. Some non-Africans have been slaves historically. The question arises why Africans were used in the New World slave trade. Two basic theories, each addressing the classic chicken or the egg paradox between slavery and racial prejudice, have been offered. The first argues that racial prejudice preceded the slave trade, that Europeans arrived in Africa culturally preconditioned to perceive Africans as inferior to themselves and thus ideally suited for enslavement. This is said to have been particularly true of the English, whose language, for example, has numerous negative usage containing the word black, blackball, blacklist, black market, black sheep. The other theory suggests that Africans were enslaved because they constitute a large and accessible labor supply that was relatively close to the Americas. The European perception of African inferiority, therefore, is regarded as an afterthought, an attempt to rationalize African enslavement after it had been accomplished. As evidence, this theory notes that initially Europeans enslaved Native Americans and even used the forced labor indentured servitude of their own kind in the New World. Further, after slavery was abolished in parts of the New World in the 19th century, for example, the British Caribbean in 1833, Chinese and East Indians were brought in as indentured servants to replace the free slaves, usually working under conditions that approach slavery. It is therefore reason that if China or India, countries with large population in the 16th century, had been situated closer to the Americas than Africa was, then their people, rather than Africans, would have been New World slaves. But check this out now. Here we go, right here. The Portuguese are acknowledged by historians to have inaugurated the transatlantic slave trade. In 1441, two Portuguese explorers, Nino Tristano and Antonio Gonçalves, sailed to what is today Mauritania in West Africa, kidnapped 12 natives, and returned home to present them as gifts to Prince Henry the Navigator. By 1460, 700 to 800 African slaves were being taken annually into Portugal for use mainly as domestic servants. Between 1460 and 1500, the removal of Africans increased as the Portuguese and Spanish established forts and trading stations along the West African coastline. By 1500, about 50,000 slaves had been taken out of Africa and most brought into Europe, where they were used mainly as domestic servants and artisans and in farming. The remainder were used in the Azores, Madeira, Canary, and Cape Verde Islands on sugar plantation, in a system that served as a model for the cultivation of commercial crops later in the Americas. Now, check this out. Okay. The Columbus 1492 voyage to New World, during which he established a settlement on Hispaniola, the present-day island of Haiti and Dominican Republic, opened up the Americas for European settlement. Following the principle of mercantilism, the New World colonies were to be exploited economically. The need to work the mines, gold, silver, and copper, and cultivate commercial crops such as sugar, tobacco, indigo, and rice created a demand for slave labor. In 1501, after the Spanish were largely unsuccessful in their efforts to conscript Native Americans, Africans were brought for the first time from Europe, Spain, to work in the New World Hispaniola. In 1510, the first sizable shipment of African slaves into the New World occurred 250 from Spain. 8 years later, African slaves were shipped by the Spanish directly from Africa to the New World. All right, so let's start right there. Let's start right there. Do you see what happened here? So the Africans went from one place to another. Why? Where am I going with this? Okay, I'm going somewhere with this because I want to show you guys something. All right. The first Africans that were brought out of Africa was those in the West African region, okay? Particularly in the area of Senegal and Ghana area, okay? They were brought from those regions and brought into Portugal and Spain as domestic servants, mean, like maids and stuff like that. Then they also was working on sugar plantation. And then from there, when Christopher Columbus made his travel to what we know today as Haiti and Dominican Republic, right? When he traveled to those areas, right, it opened up more doors for Europeans. So the Africans went from being in Spain and Portugal to being over in these places, in these areas, okay, which is known as Latin America. And guess what happened from there? Guess what they was transported to after being in those Latin countries, being in South America? Guess what they were transported to? They was transported to America. And there were those that came directly from Africa being brought back to the Spanish, to Spain and Portugal. And there were those who were brought directly from Africa to what we know today as United States. But so what I'm showing you is, it's very detrimental. It's very detrimental to say that, we don't have no type of connection with those who come from the Caribbean or those from South America, when in fact that you do, because it goes deeper. You got to study the origin of your history. It's like you went from one place to another place, to another place, to another place, and then that oppressor went back to that same place that you came from and brought some more ancestors to this place, and then went back and got some more ancestors, and then traded off those ancestors to another place, and then they traded off those ancestors to another place. So it was like you was bouncing around, bounce, 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 one, bounce, bounce, over here, over there, over there. Okay? So, and I know I keep talking about this like sound like a broken record, which I am a broken record, but I'm saying this again. You guys played into this dichotomy shit with the African, Caribbean, and the Africans and the Afro Latinos and all of that. You play into this dichotomy stuff when you don't realize that there is a connection. Okay? So you can sit here and say, well, I ain't got no ancestor in Portugal. I ain't got no ancestor in Spain. More than likely you do. You just don't know. More than likely you might have some ancestor in Spain. You might have some ancestor in Portugal. You might have somebody in Brazil. And you don't even know. I ain't got no family from no Jamaica and no Dominican Republic and Haiti. I ain't got no ancestors. What you talking about? My people came straight out of America. Yeah. They came straight out of they was enslaved here in America, but you gotta go further back. You gotta really go further back. So what I'm saying is we don't know slavery like we think we do. We don't know slavery like we think we do. We don't. We don't know. We only know itty bitty pieces of information that is given to us. A little bit narrative. Just a little bit. We just know this much. This much. And we operate off of this much information. But again, it goes deeper than that. It goes a lot deeper. It goes a lot deeper. All right. Let me go back and thank you guys so much. Thank you. I mean, it's not that hard. All you got to do is just if you know how to look up stuff and know what to look for, it's not that hard. The information is right in front of your face. But what do they say? If you put something in the book, if you want to keep something from a nigga, put it in a damn book. Because most niggas don't like to read. 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 That's the harsh reality, right? Most don't like to read. So, and you know what? And a lot of that comes from our oral tradition. Because by us being African descended people, what our people done, they didn't do a lot of reading themselves either. They did a lot more oral tradition. It was like when you told a story about somebody's life or legacy or, empire, it was based on the oral concept of it. So it was more so an oral thing. So that's what we're used to. We're used to dealing with things orally. We're used to hearing information orally versus actually doing the groundwork or doing the anthropological work and actually going to places where the events took place. We're just going by hearsay. And that's not always good. It's not always good to go by hearsay because you get a lot of misinformation. Yeah. But let me go ahead and continue. All right. So I'm going to read this last part. It says the most recent research by slave historians suggests that from 1501 to 1873, between 10 million and 15 million African slaves were brought into the New World. Since it is estimated that for every slave landed in the New World, 2 Africans perished from either the slave raids and wars in Africa, the slave caravans that marched to the coast, the coastal Balkan station prison camps where slaves were held prior to being transported, or from the horrors of the Middle Passage to travel by sea from Africa to the New World. It is likely that more than 45 million lives were lost to Africa from the slave trade. This loss, especially because it involved those who were young, child-producing population, and able-bodied, is regarded as having retarded Africa's economic development down to the present century. By most economic indices, Africa was worse off as it entered the 20th century than when it entered the 15th century. Okay. And so, these 2 paragraphs is very important. Let's look at these 2 paragraphs. Okay. Check this out. The flow of slaves across the Atlantic rising slowly, with about 3% of all slaves imported before 1600 and about 14% in the 17th century, crested in the 18th century when about 60% of the total was landed in the Americas. Since the remaining 23% arrived in the 19th century, over 80% of all of the slaves imported into the Americas arrived between 1701 and 1873. Cuba in 1873 is generally believed received the last shipment of African slaves to the West. All right. So now you may wonder, well, why is it that when you go to places like Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Brazil. Why they got such a large African population? Why they got such a large African population in the Americas? Because that's where a lot of them were transported to. They was transported to those places. A lot of them was transported to the South America and Latin America. That's why they have such a large African population. And then only about 10% was transported here. And from those 10% came about another generation of Africans, descended people that were enslaved, and then that generation produced another African descendant, and then another generation produced another African percentage, etc. Okay, so yeah, you will see there's a lot more African descended people in South America and Latin America than you will see here in North America. A lot. The population is very strong. So what I'm saying is that 10 to 15% of us, right? We make up, compared to the numbers of Africans in the other parts of the world, we make up the descendants of those that came directly from Africa and those that came directly from the Caribbean and South America and Latin America. That's big facts. That's big facts. All right, but let's continue. So it says the principal areas of Africa from which these slaves were obtained were West Africa, Senegal to Gabon, 55%, Central Africa, Congo and Angola, 25%, and East Africa, mainly Mozambique, 20%. Those taken specifically to the United States were drawn from West Africa, Senegal to Gambia, 73%, Central Africa, Congo and Angola, 25%, and East Africa, mainly Mozambique, 2%. The removal of slaves from Africa followed a general pattern that started in West Africa, saw the prime source areas shifting eastward and southward over time. This meant that the following areas successfully became the focal point of obtaining slaves: Senegambia, Sierra Leone, Windward Coast, Gold Coast, Bight of Benin, Bight of Biafra, Congo/Angola, and Mozambique. All right. So chances are your ancestry, which I'm gonna take you to mine in a moment. You may have a strong ancestry of somebody that's Yoruba, that's Igbo, Iwe, Fante, Ashanti, Fulani, Wolof, Mandinka, because those were the main tribes that were brought here to America. And it's many others. It's a long list of them, but these are the main tribes that was brought here to America from those regions. Okay. All right. So now let me show you guys my ancestry for a moment, because I'm gonna kind of give y'all an outline of this. I have shown it before, but I'm gonna show it again. All right, so let me go ahead and post it up real fast for you guys. This has come from 23andMe. All right. Okay, sorry about the delay, long delay. All right, so this is my ancestry right here. Okay, this is my ancestry composition. So it's the estimate amount that I have. As you can see, altogether it says I am 90.7% sub-Saharan African. But guess what makes up the largest percent? My West African heritage, which is 78.6%. And as you can see in the purple highlights, right, this is the regions that my ancestry came from. It says Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon, Benin, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, and Senegal, okay? And Cabo Verde, all right? So now that's my strong ancestry right there all together. That's my West African ancestry. So it says, for over a millennium before European colonization and the Atlantic slave trade, West Africans were united under a series of powerful empires, resulting in broad similarity in music, clothing, art, and cuisine. A gradient of genetic similarity extending from Senegal to Nigeria reflects a richly complex population history in a region home to over 350 million people who form hundreds of distinct ethnic groups. Okay? So check this out. As you can see, my Nigerian ancestry, that's 41.6%. Okay? This whole little region right here. Now, let's go into why. Okay, let's go into why real fast. So I'm over here and it says, Tiffany, your DNA suggests that 41.6% of your ancestry is Nigerian. Nigeria's population is the largest in Africa and one of the most diverse with over 250 ethnic groups. The country's arid north is home to people of mostly Hausa and Fulani descent, while the Yoruba people are concentrated in the southwest, the Inja people in the tropical south, and the Igbo people in the southeast. As much as 2/3 of African American sub-Saharan DNA may trace back to Nigerian ancestry due to disproportionate impact of Atlantic slave trade on the people of the region. All right. So let me go back. All right, so let's go down. Let's skip down. So as you can see, this is Central and East Africa, right? 11.8%. All right. Now let's go down to my European ancestry. So right here, you're going to see what says Southern European, Spanish and Portuguese, broadly Southern European. Not that much, but my Spanish and Portuguese ancestry is 8%. I mean, 0.4% Spanish and Portuguese. Now, I'm going to go into that. But I just wanted to show you guys that. So now let's go into why I have 0.4% Portuguese and Spanish population, which is not that much. But check this out. It says here, Tiffany, your DNA suggests that 0.4% of your ancestry is Spanish and Portuguese. Check this out. It says the genetic landscape of the Iberian Peninsula, represented today by the people of Spain and Portugal, was influenced by several Mediterranean civilizations, including 800 years of Arabic North African rule. Now, a small North African genetic signature is present in Iberian DNA, and over 8% of Spanish words carry Arabic origins. Conquistadors from Portugal and Spain colonized parts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and DNA signatures of Iberian ancestry are now relatively common in people of Latin American descent. Okay. All right. So again, right here it says what happened? The Portugal and Spain colonized parts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and DNA signature of Iberian ancestry are now relatively common in people of Latin American descent. All right. So just wanted to show you guys that. Okay. So if you guys ever take a DNA test, and I'm gonna go back and show my DNA test results again for those who may not seen it. Okay, so that's my DNA result. All right. So again, 78.6% West African, 11.8% Congolese and Southeast African, and I got 0.1% Northeast Africa. Now let's look at, all right, this is Southern East Africa. And check this out. I want to show y'all something real fast. Do you see this? Northeast African, Northern East Africa, which is 0.1%, which spans from Sudan in the northwest to Ethiopia and Somalia in the southeast, is the home to both Afro-Asiatic and Nilo-Saharan ethno-linguistic groups. The entire region has a rich history of genetic and cultural exchange between indigenous East African and immigrants from the Arabian Peninsula. All right. So again, just to show you guys, just give y'all a little background about my origin. And again, I am 90.7% sub-Saharan African. 90.7% sub-Saharan African. As you can see, those purple marks is where my ancestry will be. So my ancestry started off over here, then went over here in this area, and down up in here. Okay. But my strongest African population will be right here and within the west central part of Africa. Okay, right up in this region. That's where my strongest African genetic component is at. All right. But all together, I make up 90.7% African. All right. So, which means that I will be about 7.3% European descent. No, sorry. No. I think I calculated that wrong. 9.3% European descent. So I will be 9.3% European descent, but 90.7% African. Yeah. All right. So enough of that. I don't want to get too caught up into that, but just want to share that with you all for a little bit. Now, let's see what other information I want to share. So I want to share some passages from the book. And I want to show you guys some online sources where you guys can look up more information if you guys are interested. So as you can see, it says Portugal and the Curse of Cain, the birth of the Transatlantic Slave Trade, 1421 to 1441. All right, and it was written by Jinimbin A. Autora, Brenau University, Gainesville, Georgia. All right, so this came out on April 2021. All right. All right, then. So you guys want to look into that, you can. And the name of the article is it comes from davidpublisher.com. So I'm not gonna really read into it, but I just want to show you guys. All right. All right. Also, I have another article here I want to show y'all real fast. As you can see, it says cross-cultural trade and diplomacy. Portuguese relation with West Africa, 1441 to 1521. Havana, Ibia, Journal of World History, fall of 1992. And you can find this on jstor.org, JSTOR.org. All right. And this came out of Trent University. Okay. So let's just okay, let's just read this little part down here. Scroll it up. All right, it says the most problematic and volatile aspect of the Portuguese West African encounters was the first contact, especially in the decade that followed the first voyage south of Senegal River in 1444. The first Portuguese expedition to this area were merely extension of earlier raids on the Sahara coast, which in their turn were an extension of the religiously justified petty warfare and piracy plaguing the Western Mediterranean as well as the shore of Algarve and Morocco. Slaves and other booty were their main objective. The Portuguese captains considered themselves entitled to such a just and honorable reward for the risk and discomfort they faced in the servant of God and Henry the Navigator. Various kidnapping episodes in Wallo, Callao, and the Cape Verde Islands only contribute to the bad reputation they had acquired on the Mauritanian coast. And the further south they went, the more hostile the reception from the local people. Every landing attempt was greeted by highly effective African war parties lying in ambush, ready both to defend their territory and to capture booty of their own. All right. So if you guys are interested in reading more about this, just look this up. It's under the University of Hawaii Press, World History Association, and you can find it on jstor.org, Cross Cultural Trade and Diplomacy, Portuguese Relation with West Africa. Okay. All right, so let me stop sharing that. And then let me go into this book. So this book right here, I showed earlier, is called Black Rebellion: Eyewitness Account of Major Slave Revolt, right? Which was written by Dr. Sujan Das, which is Supreme Understanding, if y'all familiar with him. Right, so he goes further on into this book. Now let's see what he wrote. Okay. He says the history of European slave trading in Africa begins in 1441 with Portuguese captains Antonio Gonçalves and Nuno Tristanos captured 12 Africans in Cabo Branco in present-day Mauritania and brought them to Portugal as slaves. The Africans worked as servants but were also used to supply strategic information to the Portuguese about Africa. The following year, church authorities framed this Elis Quay, which promised all those who joined slave raiding parties spiritual reward and eternal salvation. Soon thereafter, Lancorte de Freitas, a Portuguese tax collector, formed a company to trade with Africa. And it also goes on and say in 1444, he shipped 235 kidnapped and enslaved Africans to Portugal, the first large group of African slaves brought to Europe. Seeing immense potential for profit in the African slave trade, the Portuguese sought confirmation from the church that they could also enslave infidels seized in the Crusades. In 1452, the Pope responded with the Dom Diveris, which allowed them to conquer and reduce the perpetual slavery all Saracens and pagans and other infidels and enemies of Christ. 2 years later, the Pope issued Romanus Pontifex, a papal bull granting the Portuguese a perpetual monopoly in trade with Africa. Now, remind you, these Portuguese and Spanish people, they were Christians. Not saying that the Africans did not practice religion of their own, because there were those who were Muslim. It was a large population of them that was Muslim more than they was Christians. But the point is, these invaders that came into the land, they used their religion as an approach, as a way to gravitate towards the people and control them all together. So these people had the agenda. So they figure by them being good old Christian, they doing the will of God, and they doing the will of God by going and get some slaves and bring them over there to Portuguese, and not realizing that they've been hoodwinked themselves. They've been fed into some bullshit. So they figured because they want to impress Henry the Navigator and all the rest of them in their own country, they would go get some slaves just so they can prove their loyalty, just so they can prove that how good and spiritual they are. And then you want to know why people don't practice religion today. Then you want to know why people say the hell with Christianity and Islam and all of that, because it has been used as a weapon. These things have been used as a weapon to control the people that's in the indigenous land. It has been used as, they have been used as weapons. So they're like, so that's why people have an attitude, say, well, what the hell? Why we need to practice Islam and Christianity when they've been used as a weapon against our people? Which it is a fact. It has. These religion has been used as a weapon. So it's not religion itself that is bad. It's the people that's behind religion. It's the ideology that's been added on to religion. Instead of getting it from a spiritual component to where people have a spiritual connection with their deity or whatever, it has been used as some form of control mechanism. But check this out. Also in the book, it mentions the first African slaves used by Europeans in present-day United States were among Lucas Vanquez de Leon's colonization attempt of present-day South Carolina in 1526. However, this attempt is a failure because the slaves almost immediately revolt and fled into the wilderness to live among the indigenous, I'm not sure what this term is, Covatachiki people. This is the first documented occurrence of a slave rebellion, followed by the rebels fleeing into an indigenous Native American community, a pattern that is repeated numerous times in the historical records. So one day I'm gonna go into the concept about the Native American. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna talk about the Trails of the Tears. What's it called? The Trails of Tears and the Cherokee Revolt, etc. So we gotta go into that too, because it seems like your indigenous folks don't get it. So we gotta go deep into that, because there's a lot of information that's going to challenge their cognitive. Just saying. But all right, but check this out. In 1552, an African of the Mandinka people named Bayano led possibly the largest slave revolt of the 16th century in Spanish Panama. After the revolt, the rebel slaves called Cimarrones meaning wild and or runaway, set up strongholds known as palenques, many of which successfully fended off Spanish control for centuries using guerrilla warfare and alliances with indigenous nations who were in similar circumstances. The development of such communities was typically rapid and impressive. Sir Francis Drake encountering the Cimarrones of Panama in 1572 and described them as a black people which about 80 years past fled from the Spaniards, their masters, by reason of their cruelty, and are since grown to a nation under two kings of their own. All right. So, also going down in 1570, Gaspar Yanga, an African of the brand people of Gabon, led a revolt near the Mexican city of Veracruz that similarly culminate in an escape to the highlands and the development of a free colony which successfully defeated itself over 30 years. Again, it goes on and on and on. So I strongly recommend you guys get this book right here. Get this book about Black rebellion. And before I go on to the next source, I want to talk about something that was considered as a disease, but now it's considered as a pseudoscience. It's called drapetomia. So I don't know if you guys ever heard this term drapetomia, but that's what the slaves were diagnosed with if they was a runaway. So let's look up the term drapetomia. Okay. All right, so if you guys can see my screen, cool. Drapetomia was considered as a congenital mental illness that in 1851, American physician Samuel A. Cartwright hypothesized as the cause of enslaved Africans fleeing captivity. Contemporary reprinted in the South, Cartwright's article was widely mocked and satirized in the northern United States. The concept has since been debunked as pseudoscience and shown to be part of the edifice of scientific racism. Okay. And the term derives from the Greek dreptes, which is a runaway, and mania, madness, and frenzy. As late as 1914, the third edition of Thomas Lathrop Stevens' Practical Medical Dictionary including an entry for drapetomia defined as vagabondage or dromomania, and uncontrollable or insane impulsion to wander. Now, as you can see, it's considered pseudoscience, but this is what they were trying to diagnose slaves with: those who were rebellious and that caused revolts, and they were runaways or whatnot. They felt like they were diagnosed with some type of mental illness. So imagine how they feel about the Igbo people, because they were told that the Igbo people were the most rebellious tribe out of all of them. Like, they will resist slavery at any cost, even if that means that they committed suicide. They was going to resist slavery. They were going to do it. And so that's where the story about the Igbo landed. If you guys go back to my previous video, many of them jumped off the boat and said, you know what, the hell with this, we're not doing this shit. No, we will fight back. So they will be considered as having drapetomia because they were so rebellious and they did not want to cooperate with the slave masters or the people that was oppressing them. All right. Now I want you guys to check out this book. And for those of you that are on my friends list on Facebook, I will post it up for you guys. This book right here is called The Rise of the Transatlantic Slave Trade in Western Africa, 1300 to 1589. Okay. And this was written by Toby Green. So Let's go into the table of content. This book was written in 2012. It was written in 2012. Okay. All right, so it got the introduction, rethinking the transatlantic slave trade from a cultural perspective, right? And it says here, part one, the development of Atlantic Creole culture in Western Africa, circa 1300 to 1550. And then you got the part two, creolization and slavery, Western Africa in the Pan-Atlantic, circa 1492 to 1589. All right, so let's look at the introduction. It says, in 1725, the English Captain George Roberts wrote a description of Cabo Verde Islands off the coast of West Africa. Thereafter, Cabo Verde, he offered a glimpse of the former glories of this archipelago, which had been at the heart of the Atlantic world when that world was in the process of its tortured formation. In the late 16th century, Roberts wrote that there was great trade at St. Jago, the largest and most populous island today called Santiago, Fugo, Mayo, Bona Vista, Sal, and Borava, especially in Negroes. They had stored of sugar, salt, rice, cottonwood, ambergris, civet, elephants' teeth, brimstones, pumice stones, sponge, and some gold. A close reading of Robert's text revealed the source of such riches, for he wrote, San Jago formerly was the great market for Negro slaves, which were sent from thrice immediately to the West Indies. Okay. Now let's skip down. That this was a vocal zone of the early transatlantic slave trade is not a new discovery. Using James Lockhart's estimate for Peru, Philip Curtin suggesting that between 1526 and 1550, almost 80% of the slaves in the New World came from the region. J. Balong when Menuda, Ava Ibil, and John Volt showed that the early slave trade from Benin, Congo, and Angola region fed the gold trade at Imina, the sugar plantation of Sao Tome, and the trade in domestic slaves to Portugal. This facilitate the prominence of Cabo Verde and the first slave trade to America. It will sit at the heart of early transatlantic movements and ideas. Yet, like most part of the African Atlantic, the region remains understudied in the early period. It was still possible for one of the key figures in the study of Atlantic slavery, Dave Elitis, to write not so long ago that the region did not have strong trade connection with the Atlantic before 1700. The reasons for this lack of emphasis are varied. Anglo-American schools of history have concentrated on the 18th and 19th centuries. Research on the earlier period is sparse and has concentrated on the lives of slaves in Spanish America. Isn't that interesting? Again, you guys can check out this book, and I'm going to post it up for you guys. Okay. It's African Studies, the Rise of the Transatlantic Slave Trade in Western Africa, 1300 to 1589. So you guys can look that up for yourselves if you guys want to check out more information. Okay. Woo, child, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. Now, let me go into this book right here. If those of you don't have Walter Rodney's book, you need to get it. Walter Rodney was from South America. In fact, he was from Guyana. Okay, so Guyana has another strong African population. Grenada has a strong African population as well. So again, when you go to South America, you will find out there's a lot of strong African population over there in that continent. All right. So how Europe undeveloped Africa. All right. This is his most popular book that he wrote before he got assassinated. So I'm holding this book up for y'all. All right. Okay, so let's see, what did he write in this book? He said Europeans used superiority of their ship and cannon to gain control of all the world's waterways, starting with the Western Mediterranean and the Atlantic coast of North Africa. From 1415, when the Portuguese captured Cintura near Gibraltar, they maintained the offensive against the Maghreb. Within the next 60 years, they seized ports such as Arizla, Al-Khazir, Shagar, or Tangier, and fortified them. By the second half of the 15th century, the Portuguese controlled the Atlantic coast of Morocco and used its economic and strategic advantages to prepare for the further navigation, which eventually carried their ships around the Cape of Good Hope in 1495. After reaching the Indian Ocean, the Portuguese sought with some success to replace Arabs as the merchants who tied East Africa to India and the rest of Asia. In the 17th and 18th century, the Portuguese carried most of the East African ivory, which was marketed in India, while Indian cloth and beads were sold in East and West Africa by the Portuguese, Dutch, English, and French. The same applied to cowrie shells from the East Indies. Therefore, by control of the seas, Europe took the first steps towards transforming the several parts of Africa and Asia into economic satellites. Yeah. All right, so let's go further down. It says, when the Portuguese and the Spanish were still in command of a major sector of world trade in the first half of the 17th century, they engaged in buying cotton cloth in India to exchange for slaves in Africa to mine gold in Central and South America. Part of the gold in the Americas would then be used to purchase spices and silks from the Far East. The concept of metropole and dependency automatically came into existence when parts of Africa were caught up in the web of international commerce. On the one hand, they were the European countries who decided on the role to be played by the African economy, and on the other hand, Africa formed an extension to European capitalist market. As far as foreign trade was concerned, Africa was dependent on what Europeans were prepared to buy and sell. And it says Europe exported to Africa goods which were already being produced and used in Europe itself: Dutch linen, Spanish iron, English pewter, Portuguese wine and French brandy, Venetian glass beads, German muskets. Europeans were also able to unload on the African continent goods which had become unsalable in Europe. Thus, items like old sheets, cast-off uniforms, technologically outdated firearms, and lots of odds and ends found guaranteed markets in Africa. Africans slowly became aware of the possibility of demanding and obtaining better import goods, and pressure was exerted on the captains of European ships. But the overall range of trade goods which left European ports of Hamburg, Copenhagen, and Liverpool was determined almost exclusively by the pattern of production and consumption within Europe. All right, so then check this out. I'm almost there. It says, from the beginning, Europe assumed the power to make decisions within the international trading system. An excellent illustration of that is the fact that the so-called international law, which governed the conduct of nations on the high sea, was nothing else but European law. Africans did not participate in its making, and in many instances, African people were simply the victims, for the law recognized them only as transportable merchandise. transportable merchandise. If the African slaves was thrown overboard at sea, the only legal problem that arose was whether or not the slave ship could claim compensation from the insurers. Above all, European decision-making power was exercised in selecting what Africa should export in accordance with European needs. Yeah, yeah. He See, this is why I like his book. See, I like this man because he really went into details about the history. And I'm surprised that he doesn't get as much credit as he should as a historian. Although he was an activist, but by him being a historian, he knew history very well. And he has not received much credit. But let's go ahead and check this out. Let's continue. It says the ships of the Portuguese gave the search for gold the highest priority, partly on the basis of well-known information that West African gold reached Europe across the Sahara, and partly on the basis of guesswork. The Portuguese were successful in obtaining gold in parts of West Africa and Eastern Central Africa, and it was the Gold Coast which attracted the greatest attention from Europeans in the 16th and 17th centuries. The number of forts built there was proof to that effect, and the nation involved include the Scandinavians and the Persians, which are the Germans, apart from other colonial stalwarts like the British, Dutch, and Portuguese. Europeans were anxious to acquire gold in Africa because there was a pressing need for gold coin within the growing capitalist money economy. Keyword, growing capitalist money economy, keyword. Since gold was limited to very small areas of Africa, as far as the Europeans were then aware, the principal export was human beings. Only in a very few places at given times was the export of another commodity of equal or greater importance. For instance, in the Senegal, there was gum. In Sierra Leone, camwood, and Mozambique, ivory. However, even after taking those things into account, one can say that Europe allocated to Africa the role of supplier of human captives to be used as slaves in various parts of the world. Again, make sure you guys get this book, and I'm gonna make sure that I read more into this. Hold on, because I want to make sure that I don't forget where I left off. All right, but I'll strongly recommend you guys check out this book because he really goes into the detail. He breaks it all down in this book. If you guys want to get into the history lesson, get this book. If you guys want to get into the social aspect of slavery, political aspect, economic part of slavery, get this book by Walter Rodney. You will never go wrong. You will not be disappointed because there's a lot of information contained in here. It's a lot of information. A lot. So check this book out for yourself. Okay. And remind you, this book was written around the 70s. Okay. This is before he got assassinated. Check it out. All right. Okay, so that's all I have for this evening. I thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for your time, as usual. So with that being said, you guys, y'all take it easy on yourselves. And shout out to the chat. Thanks to the people in the chat that's watching, supporting this channel and all this great stuff. I really appreciate that. Make sure you guys, for those of you that have not subscribed to my channel, you guys subscribe, hit the notification bell, share my channel. There's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to doing. So in the near future, but it's going to take a lot of time for me to do so. It's going to take time. Trust and believe that. But Until then, you guys take it easy. Please be safe during this pandemic. So please be safe, and I'll reconnect with you all later. So be on the lookout for Tuesday. Come up with some topics, and I will present the topics to you guys. So I haven't thought of the topic that I want to do for tomorrow, which is Tuesday, which is September the 14th. Okay, but please, until next time, I hope y'all gained something out of this. I hope y'all enjoy the video. With that being said, peace and power elevation be to all of you. And for those who may want to be interested in coming on the platform and do a show with me or something, just let me know. Reach out to me and we can go from there. All right. But until then, y'all take it easy. Y'all be safe out here in these streets. And that's that. All right. Peace.